Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. This is episode 3 for Top Tier Tweaks. Harrogate Regionals is happening next weekend. Very excited to be continuing to test in the Lost Thunder format. We've had the Latin American International Championships, Roanoke, and a few special events here and there as well to keep our eyes on. And it's been really interesting how the format is developing. There's even been entrance of some Meganium Stage 2 Greninja style decks thanks to the Japanese results. So there's lots of different things culminating into a fairly developed stage in the metagame now that we are right in the swing of things with Lost Thunder, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out on top. Today I've got what I believe to be the 5 best decks in the format currently, and also one play that I think could be pretty strong for the tournament. So let's jump into the Cephalon. I'm not going to talk about any of these in sort of any order. I feel like it's all kind of up in the air at the moment what the best deck actually is in the format, but the Cephalon is and was the most popular deck in day 2 of Roanoke. You can see my stuff has all been portrayed, so I'm probably not playing for Cephalon next weekend, but I've been trading with some of my friends, and I believe it's a very strong play. The deck is very straightforward, the list is very straightforward that I've put in here, and really, as always, I like to just give a brief overview of the deck itself. Maxing out the counts of all the Pokemon and playing 2 copies of Marshadow for that Let Loose. I think this is an actual win condition at the moment. It can be a win con against stall decks and against the stage 2 decks. Cephalon's so good at being fast and efficient. If you can slow someone down even just a little bit for a turn with a Let Loose, it can be game changing against anyone trying to develop an absolutely huge board against you. So I think that's a great shout for this weekend. Cephalon with E-switches as well has a reasonable chance against some of the stall variants, because Ninetails can recharge itself and start attacking into things like Hoopers. Although it is a 2-hit KO, forcing them to waste all their max potions can really hurt their reserves sort of later down the line. If you really want to tech for mill, you can play the Ninetails GX, but that's not in my list. I always like to go for more simple overviews. But yeah, Cephalon, still a very potent contender in the format, and those Marshadows become win conditions against decks that are trying to build up bigger boards against you. Speaking of which, Zhora Ninetails Decidueye is an archetype that I've personally been loving recently. We saw it do very well in Brisbane, and it seems to be, again, just a very good contender in the format. It increases its damage output excellently with Feather Arrow, can set up prizes or help you target down something in the active for a big 2-prize knockout. Just a very consistent build I've tried to make here. Not too many tech cards. There are some builds that you can find on Limitless and such that have a few more tech card options. I think for me, Counter Catcher's the biggest sort of tech card, but I believe to be absolutely incredibly strong in this deck when you can search out with your Ninetails. The Water Tails as well, trying to help you out as much as possible against Cephalon, because it is a popular archetype. Also, Mallow is a card that I absolutely love in this deck, because typically you only really have space for 1 or 2 Zoroarks on your board, and you're only playing a 3/3 line, so you don't expect to have as many Zoroarks on board as other Zoro variants. So trying to use Mallow to get some key pieces, such as double colours energies, Ninetails, rare candies, these sorts of things, is going to be absolutely incredible for you. So that's a really nice one-off that you can tutor out with your Lele as well, after going for those nice turn 1 Elms. I think this archetype is very strong, and I'm enjoying this list as well. Anecdotally from me, I've also moved on to a build that also plays Solgaleo in the list. Solgaleo is just a good card in the format right now, because it hits good weaknesses on Ninetails and Gardevoir. So yeah, that's something that you might want to look into. If you want to go onto the CCG Facebook page, you can check out my League Cup winning list. Additionally, just while we're on the topic of CCG, we've started doing videos for Complexity Card Gaming. So if you also just head on to the CCG Facebook page, you'll then see the links to the YouTube, and you can start seeing a video that I made actually talking in more detail about a Zoroark Decidueye Ninetails, so perfect timing if you want to know more about this deck. And yeah, lots of content from lots of different creators in our team for Complexity, so going to be a big channel in the next few weeks and months, and hopefully into the future when we're going to be doing consistent content. It's going to be a really good channel that I'm excited to be a part of. On to deck number 3, Gardevoir. It's still a potent archetype. Again, trying to use this Ninetails engine, using Beacon, getting your Swamperts out into play, makes the whole deck tick a lot better. Jimmy, of course, won Roanoke with this archetype. I think this list is very similar to his. I think the only real thing as we look down is that I'm playing Energy Retrieval over Energy Lotto. Lotto is very good for grabbing your like super boost on a key turn, but I think Energy Retrieval is usually a little bit more consistent at helping you get attacking turn 2, because typically you'll have to pay retreat into an Alolan Vulpix, and then you can tutor out energy cards again for yourself. So that Energy Retrieval, very, very nice, I think, is a one-of in the deck. Not too much else to say, as the fact is I'm trying to go for a more consistent list. Second Time Ball as well, I think, is really nice, just to build up into those Stage 2 Pokemon. It is so vital to get those off, so that's what I'm going for. And yeah, I think, again, the deck is very strong. You can use Ninetails to jump over Beast Rings. You can use Sublimation GX as well against Ultra Beast things. And it's so easy for you to knock out Zoroarks. They have 210 hit points. They give you a 60 damage for free. So if you're doing things like Snowy Winds in the early turns for single prizes, putting 30s on them here and there can just make it really easy for Gardevoir to reach. This, of course, has resistance to dark, so using things like Max Potions and Twilighting back in Max Potions, Choice Bands, and more DCs and stuff like that, it's going to be incredible for you. If you are able to develop your Solgaleo, you give yourself no weakness, which is insane. Also, this is a great attacker, again, in mirror matches against other Ninetails that are in a bunch of different decks right now. At the same time, it powers up your Gardevoir, so it's absolutely incredible to get this 1-1 line into play if you're able to. So very strong archetype as well in the format right now. On to deck number 4. Again, no particular order here. I think they are all tier 1 decks right now, these 5. Going on to a sort of gas can Malamar build. I think it's important to go for a second count of Marshadow GX right now. There's a lot of Zoroark being hyped for this tournament. Obviously Zoroark Decidueye Ninetales, but also other Zoroark variants. Zoro Rock and Zoro Weavile are both going up in popularity simply because they can develop their Zoroarks turn 2, then hit the opponent with a Judge, try and make them draw badly whilst you're building up good stage 1s in the back and having trade to have a way better hand advantage against people. So having 2 copies of Marshadow as well as 2 copies of Rescue Stretcher should be able to help you recycle it in that matchup a lot. Additionally, trying to improve your Zoroark matchup, especially if you are able to go first, is getting a Bell of Silence off against them and using Chimecho. Even if Chimecho is to get knocked out, you can then start copying it with Marshadow at times, which is actually really important to note. So yeah, that can be a really nice card against Zoroark, but also against a lot of ability-based decks. Gardevoir can't get any of its stuff into play. They have to start attacking you with like Curliers and stuff, which is insanely good for you. Decidueyes can't get into play. Like, this just stops a lot of the things in the format, and it allows you to build up your board of Malamars. So really, Malamar going first is also one of the most threatening decks in the format right now, simply because you can move into that Chimecho so effectively and stop the opponent getting their own board set up. It's only a very small handful of decks where Bell of Silence isn't going to be really important for you, so very, very cool one-off to have in the deck. From there, the attackers are pretty straightforward. 1 copy of the Giratina that you can recycle if need be. 1 copy of Let Loose. I've mentioned it time after time after time already in this video, but all these decks are relying on beacons and getting their stage 2s online. Trying to make it hard for them is going to be a big way to win games when we look at Harrogate. Only real additions that we see from Lost Thunder is actually Adventure Bag, allowing you to get your tools straight out the gate. Excellent stuff for you. Because we never really need to play a full 4 copies of a skateboard. Field Blower is a 1 or 0 count in all the decks that I'm showing today. So it really is just able to stick on the board for a long period of time. Adventure Bag is like playing 5 escape boards in terms of having the outs for them in the early game, but it deck thins a little bit better for you, and it also allows you to play Choice Band, which can also help you just reach a lot more, using things like Moon's Eclipse GX to knock out 190 and 210 hit point stage 1, and bigger basic GXs is huge, and sometimes you just require 1 less energy with things like Prismatic Burst, so that can be a huge deal for you. The Choice Band, really nice addition. Everything else is fairly consistent and straightforward, with that Gas Can Malamar trying to make it draw as best it can and let the tech Pokemon do the talking is pretty much how the deck tries to function. And the final deck is going to be Zoro Rock Weavile, the final tier 1 deck, I would say. This is, I think, one card different from the list that I showed on the channel just a couple days ago, so if you want to see gameplay of this, you can indeed. The only thing I changed was cutting Max Potion for a third Cynthia for a slight buff of consistency. The Max Potion in such an aggressive build seems a little bit redundant. You still have Acerolas and Palpad if you are going to be in one of those sorts of loops, but typically you want to be knocking stuff out a lot quicker with this build. You have Counter Gain to try and burst dangerous rogues out of nowhere. You have Ditto and Sneasel, Weavile and Stretcher to try and loop that. So many abilities right now in the format, you really can prey on your opponent as they build up their board and use Evil Admonition to take big 2-prize swings on a non-GX that is so threatening that they probably have to deal with immediately, so very good for your prize trade. A Lower Muck, also a great card just for the likes of Lost March and Gramble and such, if those are still going to pop up. But again, this win condition can sometimes come simply from Judge. It gives you a win condition against stall decks, trying to use Steven's Resolve on you and get big hands going. You can judge them into hopefully poor cards, and at the same time, judging some of these stage 2 decks whilst you've already gone and got yourself 1 or 2 Zoroark on the board, start taking single prize knockouts on their Vulpix and stuff like that. Hopefully you're going to start pressurizing them and making it hard for them to keep up in the game, whilst you still have the likes of Lycanroc and Weavile in the back to help you out if they do start building up big boards. So I think, again, Zoroark definitely going to be popular this weekend. I can definitely see it being successful as well, because it is so straightforward and consistent and has been such a mainstay since Zoroark was released pretty much. So on to the 6th deck for me, not quite popular in tier 1 or anything like that, but one that I think is pretty strong. It's taking the same shell as the Gardevoir list, but increasing the Solgaleo count. Honestly, the more I've played with this Solgaleo, the more I think it just makes sense in the format right now. So incredible that this Turbo Strike can be doing 150 with a Choice Band, which sets up Ninetails with energy to then use Snowy Winds to finish something off and put 30 on the bench. Or if you can use a Guzma play, if you hit something with 180 damage, like a Cephalon, you can go for a Guzma play and use Snowy Wind to set the next thing up and also take a bench knockout, which is incredible for you. Similar to how the Decidueye decks try and jump over Beast Ring, you can try and do the same thing here with Solgaleo and Ninetails. His typing is insane for Gardevoir, very good against Decitails as well, because they're always playing Ninetails down against you, because they have to, really, to set up. They can't just not get it into play, otherwise their board is going to be pretty poor. So preying on that is incredible. Giving yourself no weakness obviously gives you a chance against Cephalon, whilst you're also powering up the Ninetails, which are very powerful against them, because they also have Sublimation GX. We are playing the Super Boost package to attack with Swampert as well, and I'm playing 1 copy of the Ultra Road Solgaleo GX, so in certain situations you can go for Sunsteel Strike with exactly the Super Boost, but the build that I've gone for is actually a more fairy-focused build. On the channel, you'll see one where I have a 2-2 split of the Solgaleo, a much thicker line with a split of Fairy and Metal Energy, and I think it was just trying to do too much. This is a much more simplified build. You get the Ultra Road out just for its ability a lot of the time. You don't actually need to be using Sunsteel Strike, although it can be a nice finishing move for you. I really like this as a one-of for Mill, because now we auto-win Mill by having Turbo Strike, getting us back energy cards, never being able to be stalled thanks to this Ultra Bird ability, and a non-GX in Xerneas that can get through a wall of Hoopers. So Bright Horns is an incredible attack, not only for a Mill, of course, but it can get to 190 as well with all these energies that you replenish thanks to Turbo Strike. This Xerneas does get up and rolling quite nicely and can take, again, 2 for 1 on that prize trade, and having 160 hit points is so awkward to get over for a lot of decks. So it really does become a great late game win condition for you once you've used a couple Turbo Strikes in the game. I think overall the Solgaleo just offers so much. Such a chunky Pokemon, uses its own Prominence GX against spread decks and Decidueye builds, has those max potions, has obviously great typing right now in the format, and we have that same consistent shell that we saw from the Gardevoir list. But this time I've got a little bit more space to play with because you need to play physically less energy cards. It allows me to put in that counter catcher that I'm so fond of in the Zoroark deck. I think this deck can also take full advantage of it in here. I'm also playing a Rescue Stretcher, which the Gardevoir deck doesn't need to do because it has Twilight. We're not quite as lucky in that case, so I'm going to play the one-off Rescue Stretcher. Hilariously enough, you could do the flip-flop that the Gardevoir deck does and play a 1-0-1 line of Gardevoir, whereas the Guardi plays the 1-0-1 Solgaleo. If you want to do that, your Gardevoir then can Twilight some important cards back in for you. But I think this deck is a little bit more aggressive than the Gardevoir build, and overall doesn't need that sort of replenishment. I think it's fine on its own, just getting energy throughout the whole game, and eventually moving into the likes of Xerneas and Swampert with a super boost, stuff like that, for some non-GX big prize knockouts. So overall, I think this is a really solid play. It does suffer the same issues against things like Let Loose and Judge that we see from the Gardevoir deck, but I do think this is just type-wise, and just Solgaleo GX in general is such a potent card in the meta right now that he really is polarizing, and I want to have him in whatever deck I'm playing next weekend because I think it's just so good. So there you go, guys. That is going to be all my top tier tweaks for this weekend. Not too much to mention other than the fact that we need to keep an eye out for a few things. Mill is another deck that's sort of waiting in the wings and has some pretty good matchups here and there. If you don't tech for it, you'll have noticed in the list I don't have really any out-and-out techs in these lists. I think things like judging them consistently and using like Ninetails to attack with the Cephalon and a few things here and there. Gascan can have a reasonable time against it if you can escape board your Dawnwings, Necrozma. There's a few things you can do naturally in these builds to try and beat Mill, but I think the Mill decks are so frustrating right now that they are something that you need to be concerned about this this coming weekend. I think also things like Judge and Let Loose is going to be rife, and you need to try and be as consistent and simplistic as possible, I believe, in order to have the best odds next weekend, because if you try and get too creative with tech cards, you're just going to get punished because you'll not be able to do anything with your 5-card hand. So I think that's the best advice I can give. Overall, there's all sorts of different decks that we can be expecting as well. Things like Gramble, always going to be a contender, very powerful. If Zhora Rock is increasing in play and Zhora Weavile, that deck can definitely do quite well there, because they typically have less healing cards than other Zoroark decks. And overall, I think it's going to be a really interesting tournament. There could also be murmurs of this Swampert Meganium Stage 2 deck. I think it's very cool, and maybe some people will take a risk with it. Also, Ultra Malamar. Lots of different decks in the format right now. Basically, there's a wide plethora of decks that you have to try and beat, so it's going to be pretty insane, and I think no single person will have the same day in terms of what decks they'll come up against. Honestly, you could face 9 different decks in day one, or you could face like 3 Zoroark, 3 Cephalon, 3 Gardevoir. Like, who knows? It's going to be pretty insane. But it's really exciting, and I'm ready for another big tournament before the end of the year. So let me know if you guys are going to Harrogate. What are you going to be playing? Do you think there are any other decks that are top tier right now? What do you think about the deck lists? I'll hear it all down below. I'd love to get involved in conversation with you all. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.